You're not in trouble right now, Gary, so you can smile.
Oh, I can smile tonight. Okay.
Oh no, Brody.
Well, we meant to put him up.
Every time I talk, he'll whine at us. Okay, so I am just so glad that this is happening. I've been talking to a lot of people, and they are like, "What are you working on right now, Shaylee?" And I said, "Let me tell you, I'm doing a Master Gardener book club, and I'm so excited, and I think everyone else is excited too." I don't know if anyone else across the state has done this, so we might just be the cool kids of the state of Indiana. Um, and hopefully, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm not a big reader. Like, I like to read, hey Ashley, I like to read on like an airplane or on a beach. But that's not every day for me. Although some people probably think so because I've gone a lot. But I do not get to do that very often, but I tell you what, it's been really fun to just sit. I've been closing my office door during the day and just been reading this book, and it's really fun for me. So I hope it's been fun for you guys too. But how this is gonna work is you guys have seen the outline, right? And kind of working through those chapters. There's a lot of different ways, and if you've been in a book club before, you know that there's lots of different ways to kind of go about this. But I just think breaking it up piece by piece is what makes sense in my brain. So that's kind of why we're doing it that way. But week one last week, sorry I was out. But we read the introduction. So does anyone, we're just gonna go through, I have some questions. So we're just gonna go through some questions and kind of do some discussion, if you will. So feel free to unmute, or if you want to raise your hand, there should be a little hand raise reaction thing, so that if you want to speak, you can answer more discussion, the better, obviously. But since we have two, well, kind of three chapters for so to say, or to go over this week, we might skip over some that I have. But um, so first instinct of the book, what do we think so far? Are you moved yet? I can say one of my feelings so far is, okay, I'm ready to like, I want to keep reading, right?
Mhm.
But who wants to say what they think so far about what you've read?
Well, he's very much on target. I've read so many or seen so many of the videos of his, and he's an excellent speaker and um, target wise, he's right on target as far as what we need to be doing.
Sure. Yeah, and what well, we'll talk about that in a minute, but thanks, Gary. Anyone else?
I like it that I get the impression he's bringing it around to what you can do in your home, in your yard, because you know just having nice national parks is not enough, and who knows how long those will be with us too. So we each have to kind of try to do the best we can with our own piece of land, whether it's small or large. And that's what I struggle with because um, it with aging as well. There's just so much I can do, but I want to try and do what I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it was a real jolt. It was, anxiety inducing. And I know all these things after all the classes we take doing the Master Gardener things and being involved with the garden club. However, it was just came around full circle to really read it in print, how serious the situation is.
Yes, Susie, I totally agree with you.
I don't know if anybody can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yep.
Hello, can you see me?
No.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I pushed all the buttons. This is Cindy. Can you hear? Do you see that it's asking me to leave?
No, it's not asking you to leave.
Okay.
Hey,
Oh, there we go. Now we
It
can see you.
it said the host asked me to be okay. Sorry
To be
guys.
seen.
To be seen. Okay, I'm here now. Hi, guys. Sorry. I thought it was kind of sad. It was when I started reading it.
Yes.
Like, oh, moo. I'm more of an upbeat person. I want to hear how we fix things, not like, let's talk about the bad part of it.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's kind of like the trend. Like I think that as we start going through the book, you're going to realize like, okay, now it's not as sad, right? But I think it is sad right now because it is hitting a nerve, right? And I think that for me at least, like you're right. I think that there's parts that I'm like, oh my gosh, like I need to keep reading because I don't want to be sad, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's
Well,
how
you
I.
have to understand the problem before you go about solving it. So he's laying groundwork of what the problems are so that we can work towards solving them.
Yeah, absolutely, Craig. Yes. Perfect. Okay, so with that, I think that gives us all kind of a better idea of, where we're at and what we're thinking. I think a lot of us are on the same page. As far as the overview and introduction, something that my book looks like a Bible. I've been writing and highlighting and making sticky notes. But one thing on page 8, it says, I found that most people fall into one of the three groups. They like plants, they like animals, or they like neither. And I think that maybe I might be the only one that says I'm an animal person. Uh, and you're thinking, oh, Shaylee, why are you leading Master Gardeners if you're not a plant person? I am a plant person, but I'm just an animal person first. But do we feel like we can each kind of get into a group like that? Like, where do we feel like we fit in?
Can you have a group that's animal and plant people?
I
See,
was going
I
to say
think
I'm
that would,
both.
yeah, I think that would only be fair, but he
Yeah,
didn't give us that option.
no.
So, but yeah,
I
just
would have
something
to
to
be
think about.
I would have to be an animal person first, but both are
Yeah,
important to me.
on the same like, wavelength, Susan. Awesome.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry. I'm going to make a
Yeah,
comment
yeah,
um once I figured out my buttons here.
understand.
So when you say, and I may be overanalyzing, but when you say animals, like I like animals. I have a lot of animal pets at my house, but the animals on the outside of my house, like I have bunnies in my house, but I don't necessarily like the bunnies on the outside of the house because they eat my flowers.
Yeah.
So, I try to put stuff out there that maybe they would like and, the plants to try to deter them. So I don't know. Over analyzing the animals, I think I'm both, but do we have to specify the kind of animals? You know,
No,
like,
because yeah, that's a good point. Because as you kind of read further down in that paragraph, it talks about how he's like addressing all three. And once you get into chapters 1 and 2, you start to realize like, biodiversity is both animals and plants. So looking at more so, Michelle, looking at the bunnies, right? Not necessarily your dog or your cat that's not necessarily hurting your ecosystem. Um, but it talks about the flora and fauna and just being able to you have to have both in order to reach that biodiversity. So that's kind of what he's leading towards. But that was just
okay.
a fun question, right? Just
Yep.
a little brain teaser. Um, Thinking about, okay, but I am both. Um, yeah.
You have to understand the whole ecosystems because animals interact with plants, interact with animals, and when you take one or two of them out, then there's unknown to you consequences generally.
Yep.
They're,
Absolutely.
they're dependent upon each other.
Hmm. Yep.
Where we used to live, there was a thicket, and they called it a creek, but it was really a stormwater ditch. And there was a lot of brush around part of it. And the people who had the units closest to that wanted that all cleaned out. And I said, there are lots of animals that live here. And they said, that's why we want it cleaned out. And I said, but if you clean it out, then they're going to be in your garage. They'll be in the thicket if you leave the thicket there. It was really a hard sell to convince people of that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not like there were bears or anything. It was, there was a fox that people would see once in a while, and maybe a coyote once in a while, and of course rabbits and squirrels. Um, but it was hard to get people to understand that they're going to stay in their habitat if you leave them their habitat. If not, they're going to become pests.
Yep, absolutely. Very good. So that's a good little leeway. And looking further down on page 8, it says we must now act collectively to put our ecosystems back together again, right? Thinking about our animals and our plants. What is needed is nothing less than a cultural transformation. Rather than acting as if we were independent of nature, we need to behave a little more reverently or respectfully towards nature, as if we were the product and beneficiary of a vibrant natural world rather than its master. So here's a question I want to pose based on that. How how can we act to perform this cultural transformation? What does respect towards nature mean to you? How can we act to perform this cultural transformation? And what does respect towards nature mean to you?
I think one way is kind of giving up the like common vision of perfection of like the perfect lawn or like the perfectly manicured flower beds. And being willing to plant natives, plant pollinators that maybe don't look, depending on your perspective, they don't look as perfect, but they're so beneficial for butterflies and bees and all of that. And even your grass, we have several beehives, and so we don't mow our grass as quickly in the spring as other people do because we like to see all the bees on the clover and everything like that. So just being willing to swap out some things that maybe traditionally aren't thought of as looking as nice, um, but they give a better place for our pollinators and other animals.
Yes, for sure.
My pet peeve is litterers. Oh, it drives me crazy when somebody throws their trash out, even just driving on the road. I want to stop and pick it up and throw it away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not respectful to nature. Yeah.
I think too, I live on a pretty small property and I've tried to plant early on some larger beds and have trees in those beds and then natives and other plants around them. And and um and I've tried to plant the entire ground so that I'm not always mulching, weeding. It's not as pristine of a look, but this summer was pretty successful. I didn't weed once because I filled it with plants and they're larger beds. So the sum total of my yard, there's a larger area planted rather than pristinely landscaped. Um, Similar to what Ashley said, but I think she probably lives in a much bigger property than I do.
Since I
Yeah.
took that master gardener class, it gave me a whole different perspective on respecting nature and seeing the butterflies and the native plants. It has been an eye opening for me this summer, planting my flower bed in a different way. And I absolutely love it. Yes, it's not, absolutely beautiful, but to see the pollinators come and it's just, it's just been eye opener. I think that's a big respect for nature and what it has to offer and the beauty of it, really, if you sit back and look.
Yeah. So that kind of Oh, Whitney, I can't hear you.
She's got her mute button on.
Okay. Is that better?
There you go. Hey,
Okay.
girl.
So, I was just thinking that I think it's some of it is like a mental shift for um what we appreciate from. I just really loved some of the, in some parts you talked about like being having in your brain that you're part of an ecosystem, you know. And I like that in thinking about our gardens and our properties and things like that um as part of an ecosystem, like a part. So you're like a steward or a manager of an ecosystem, you know, a micro ecosystem there on your property. And I think that innately gives you, you know, you're a part of that. So the things you do affect it, and the stuff that happens there affects you. And um, I just liked the idea of being a part of it. I think just thinking about it that way makes me hold it in higher regard.
Yeah, I love that. You got your own little piece of heaven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I volunteer at my brother's house in Carmel. He's donated his property to Hamilton County Parks when they die. It's about 13 acres, but we go up there weekly and we are called land stewards. So I think steward is the right connotation for respect and working with plants and animals, ecosystems, try to get them to move forward.
Yeah, that's a great term for sure.
Today we
And
were taking um, logs out, some of them to be milled, but then some of them the remainder of the tree, we build hopefully a habitat for an animal that would occupy. We used to clear that all out of the way, and now, you know, we create piles everywhere for the animals so that they'll have a place to be.
awesome.
That's important. I've noticed that especially this year because it was my garden's third year after being planted, so things are really filling out, and the habitat for birds and bunnies and all kinds of things just it was astounding, and it was pretty too. It just looked natural.
Yeah, awesome. Another thing in that kind of same on page 9, it talks about unfortunately, our ignorance of nature has led to dangerous indifference about its fate, right? So being, you all are at a super, super good advantage, because you're a master gardener, right? And you've learned these things. But it talks about we do not teach our children that plants and animals actually generate the life support systems we all require. And I think that's important to note because as master gardeners, how can we bridge that gap? What do you guys do all the time?
Educate.
Yes, thank you, Susan. Education, right? Being able to
Mm-hmm.
get in our communities and tell them, about native plants. It talks later about, when choosing plants for your landscape. And, there's a lot of people that only think about the decorative value, right? They're only going to be gardening for beauty. But I think as we look through here, and as we continue reading, it's not going to be, um, you know, like we just talked about. It's not all about aesthetics and it's not all about that perfectly polished lawn, but actually gardening for an ecological function instead. So, thought that was interesting. I guess let's jump into chapter 1, The Dreamers. And let's talk about that first dreamer, Aldo Leopold. Okay. Um, what was he known for? What was he famous for? What did you get from reading his little biography there?
He learned from his mistakes, is basically what it was, when he killed the last wolf
Yeah.
Yeah.
and how that affected everything.
Yeah. How it affected the ecosystem, right? Hey?
Mm.
And so he was more of that animal type of guy, right? When you're looking at, you're a plant person, you're an animal person, but he was kind of more, he started out as that animal person. Um, what else? What else do we find interesting?
I like it that it said what distinguished him from other naturalists of his day was his interest in how members of a community interacted with one another and the physical world they inhabited. And I guess that's called a systems biologist, but I think that that's important to look at.
Yeah, I love that. Do you guys hear my cat? She's crying. Okay, something that I noted was about the land ethic that respects and protects all members and aspects of nature in harmony with the people's needs. So thinking about, how can we adopt a land ethic that respects and protects all members to meet the needs of people? What could that look like?
I think you have to get the government uninvolved.
Well, they've been doing a pretty good job of that lately, as far as the environment goes.
Yeah, that kind of is that leeway to the national parks in chapter 2, right? But in the Endangered Species Act. But yeah, one way. Anyone else have a different perspective? Um, it's cool to admire kind of that concept. And they talked about that too, but unfortunately, it's not always done in a meaningful way. That's why he wrote this book, right? That's why he and other scientists and conservationists are trying to put that on here. Another thing is on the bottom of page 20, it says the ecosphere, the frighteningly thin zone at the Earth's surface to which life is constrained, is not getting any bigger. There is no more land today than there was 600,000 years ago when Homo erectus first harnessed fire. Um, and yeah, you're right, there is no more land, right? I think that we see that especially a lot here in central Indiana. That, oh, we're just getting bigger and bigger, right? They're building more buildings. There's a new strip mall every time I go up 135. There's a new housing addition. That's just the time we live in. But also, I'm gonna put my agriculture hat on, and I do get frustrated when I see all those things. But also, science has come such a long way, and yes, we have less land to farm, but we can produce more on the acres that we have than when we had all the land that we used to. So that's another perspective, and I think that's a perspective for homeowners and home gardeners too, is that with how genetics and how plants and how far we've come with growing our own food, that we don't necessarily need a whole bunch of land to do that anymore, like we once thought we did.
But the problem is with all the building that more of that land is getting built over and paved over, and like our sewage stormwater charge tripled this last
Right.
year, and it wasn't very much to begin with. And my husband says, "Well, why is that?" I said, "Well, you think about it. There's all these houses going up, and the drainage isn't when the storm runoff is not running off the way it used to because of that. So when we take when we take land out of the wilderness and out of farming, um, it's not doing good things to it necessarily. It's having other effects
But
because it's getting
farming has all the toxins as well, and
Yeah,
that moves into the water systems. And I think he's saying that too, is that's not
yeah,
always a good thing. Is farming all the land isn't. I mean, we're
isn't either.
supplying much more than our for ourselves
Mhm,
in this system.
mhm.
So I think he's saying, yes, the whole ecosystem, which includes the water and the storm water and those kind of things.
Yeah, is being disturbed 100%.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'm part of it.
Yeah, we all are.
Moved into one of those houses, and and then I wanted the building to stop, and it isn't going to happen.
Yep. We're all a part of it. The world is just keeps on evolving and we just keep on
Mhm,
going with
mhm.
it. Yep.
And that's part of
Okay.
the way of saying wake up and put yourself in it instead of looking at it from the outside.
Yeah.
Okay, looking at anyone else have anything for um Aldo? Okay, let's talk about E.O. Wilson and fishing accident gone wrong, right? But it helped him lead to be interested in what?
Little teeny creatures.
Little things.
Yes, little tiny things. Yes, creatures, insects. First it was flies, right? And then eventually was ants. Um, but the reason and the reason why the flies is because they needed to be mounted on pins, right? Um, and to study them. And they couldn't get those because of World War II. So then he had the vials and decided that he wanted to look at ants. Um, what about E.O. Wilson was interesting to you guys?
I like that he created, defended, and brought to the fore the field of social biology, which in itself spawned the new discipline of evolutionary psychology, which I'd like to know, understand more what that term means. Evolutionary psychology.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's maybe a Google search I need to do. That interested me.
Yeah. I'll have to do some research on that, Susan.
I really loved how his experience gave he how one person's actions, one person's life can influence more than we think. And of course, because of his profession, his spirit influence a lot larger than maybe ours is as a master gardener. But um I just really loved seeing that impact. Like he didn't set out to do to introduce new areas of study at the university level, like that wasn't a
Hmm.
goal of his. It was a consequence of him doing what he cared about and acting for what he felt was good. And I loved seeing that, and that it carried through his whole life. I mean, his last book was published and he was like 89 or something like that when it was published. And I found that to be very inspiring.
Yeah, I liked his story too. Yeah.
And also that, that accident could have shut him down, and instead he found a way to work in spite of it or even because of it, and did so much. So that's just an encouraging example too.
Yep. Awesome.
I liked how he encourages not to just think about the preserved land and the parks and where people are not. I think that was talked about earlier too, that all of us can have an impact, whether it's a rooftop container garden or you know, every little, even in the big cities, the bird watchers are out, and there's every nature will find its way wherever if we'll just encourage it a little bit. So it doesn't always have to be on a grand scale.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all the gardens that the master gardeners are growing are organic, not using chemicals. And I mean, if you listen to him, you have to do the natural thing, not put fertilizers, etc. Right?
I mean, I don't think that I've gotten that vibe yet, but it might be coming, but I also, um, I mean, it's a personal decision too. Um, and there's no right or wrong. I mean, honestly, that's just a personal preference.
But there are organic ways to fertilize, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It depends on if you're using a natural fertilizer or if you're using,
Right. That's what I mean.
yes. Because if you're not using natural, then it's going into the wastewater and
Right.
starts that whole cycle.
Right.
So,
But I mean,
go ahead,
I
Susan.
just think caring for your soil is, you know, a natural way to fertilize.
Mhm.
If you do that, you don't have to add a lot of chemicals, but or any.
So let's look at the dreams to reality part. On page 25, it talks about when Leopold moved from moved east from New Mexico, he recognized that conservation model he had followed in the West, setting aside larger tracts of government land, would not work in Wisconsin, right? Mostly because most land there was in private-owned farms and ranches. So looking at our area, how can that kind of be different from one of your guys' houses to the next? How could that conservation model look different in different areas of our county? Here comes my cat.
Well, I can't remember the name of the film that Gary arranged for us to see, the Kiss the Ground.
Oh yeah,
And the sustainable farming practices. Oh, what a sweet kitty.
this is
How old
awesome.
is
She is a year and a half.
year and a half? I've got a black cat too, but she's a lot bigger. He's a lot bigger than that.
She also has a brother.
Um, all those sustainable farming practices. That was a really interesting movie, and I'm sure there are farmers in Johnson County doing those kinds of things. I would like to learn more about that. Just, you know, just to be a better citizen, because I think it would give me ideas about things I could do on a much smaller scale. And it'd be good to know that it's happening.
Yeah.
Farm Bureau.
What'd you say, Craig?
Start to talk to the Farm Bureau folks.
Oh yeah. I mean, I can
They will know the farmers and their practices.
yep. So do I. So I'd be happy to hook you up with somebody. We have a long list of farmers in the county that do conservation practices. But yeah, Susan, I'd love to help you. Yeah.
That would be great to have as a
Master Gardener meeting.
Yeah.
it's a garden club meeting too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay,
Maybe
Gary, take
a
notes.
panel. Maybe a panel of them to talk about the different things they do. I don't know. We'll make it extra hard on you, Gary. Give us 5.
I appreciate that.
I'm writing that down.
Or maybe our group could visit their farms and, you know, do they sell products to the public? We could support them in their efforts
That's
by
a
buying
great
their
idea.
products.
Oh, Pam, that's so funny because I was thinking last week about doing like a farm tour visit type of
That would
thing.
that's
So I think
cool.
that would be really fun. Gary, don't
It's
steal
not
that
like
idea. I'm writing it
Ireland.
down.
That's a cool idea, Pam.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the soil and water conservation groups that actually do those things now.
Yeah.
I
And
go to Marion County and Hamilton County soil and water conservation groups on
the
several tours.
yeah, they have a it's a government entity, so it's not up and running right now, but they have a crop they have a specific group that looks into conservative cropping systems. So that could be an option too. Linda Holscher is the gal that puts that initiative on. But she's a good, I actually sat in one of their meetings. They have a whole group of like mentor farmers that get together and they talk about how they handle conservation practices on their farm. And they get matched up with newer farmers get matched up with a veteran farmer, and they talk about their practices and how to implement those. So, yeah, we could definitely do some sort of workshop on that. I think that's a great idea. Yep.
I volunteer at a community garden that it's an organic garden. So we use leaf compost primarily to build the soil, but then we use crop rotation. We use cover crops, which is, kind of out of the soil and water conservation folks, to one, conserve the soil, hold the soil, and not let the weeds grow, and then tarp it in the spring, plant right into that. And so we try to do that planting scheme with the different, I don't remember, families of plants, in others, root, leaf, etc. So the nitrogen producers, we try to make the cover crop. If you planted tomatoes there, it's nitrogen depleted, so that you try to plant a cover crop that will actually add nitrogen back to the soil to get back to where you need to be for the crop going in the next year that's rotated in there.
Yeah. Awesome. And further down on that page 25, but it just says it goes into detail about, if conservation is to happen, it has to happen largely on private property, but not just on farms and ranches. It has to include all of our private property, including the smallest city lot to the largest corporate landscapes. So, sorry. Um, it's not just, we can't just rely on those large private property owners. The last thing I kind of noted on chapter 1 was on page 26. I guess there's two things. The quote from Leopold that said, "The oldest task in human history is to live on a piece of land without spoiling it." Um, that just kind of really resonated with me because like we're talking about taking care of it. And then later on it says most of us bought land that was already spoiled and we must now fix it. So thinking about that perfectly polished lawn. Anything else from chapter 1 that anyone wants to make note of or specify about?
I mean, some of that growing grass, people don't like weeds, so they treat for weeds. If you let the grass grow tall enough, it chokes out the weeds, and you're not implementing something that doesn't need to be implemented in the long term, even if you have turf grass.
Or don't cut it as short.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
definitely.
Yeah.
'Cause,
Or as
yeah,
often. Yeah.
Yep.
when I was reading this, and they were talking about public parks and national parks and so forth, I couldn't help but remember my last visit to a national park, and it was so crowded and so overrun with tourists, bumper to bumper going through there. I thought, gee, the best thing I can do for the environment is to not go to the national parks anymore. And it's a sad thing, but ecotourism has gotten really out of hand, and it's not helping the ecology of the world. We have to go someplace where it's pretty and it makes us feel good that we're back in nature. But then we come home, we spoil that too. While it's becomes overrun, and then we come home and do nothing.
So go volunteer and work part of it.
Yeah,
Part of the working side, not the,
yeah. If I
you're
didn't
there to
have,
enjoy it after
yeah,
your work's done.
right.
I I wish I could be on the same page as you, Susan, as having gone to a national park, but I'm a loser and I've never been to a national park.
I
Um,
haven't been to a lot of them, but
so, well, I guess I take that back. I've been to the Indiana Dunes. I think that's a national park.
yeah, it's a
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
that
state
is.
and national.
It's a
Okay, so
national
National.
seashore.
perfect. Yeah. That was in like my freshman year of high school. Um,
It wasn't a national park then. It wasn't until just a few years ago that it was a national park.
so technically I
So you
haven't been.
have, technically you have not.
Well, I guess I need to get out of my comfort zone and go to a national park. No more cruises, only national parks. No more Disney World. Just kidding. Nobody freak
They have
out.
state parks as well, not just national
Yeah,
parks.
I've been to state parks,
Yeah.
but I mean
Yeah,
national parks. Like,
the state parks are not crowded like the national parks are, I don't think. I mean, I'm sure they are, but when I've been, it's not too bad.
I mean, Brown County's in my backyard, so
Yeah,
that is
people
fun.
seem to be pretty good stewards in those parks.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, backing up a little bit. We'll come back to national parks, but Paige, um, just talking about like the first couple pages, pages 27 to 29, talk a lot about how we first started out, right? When Europeans came to North America. But on 29, something that I thought about was to lose wilderness was to lose an important part of the American identity. Do we think this is still true today? Do we think we've lost that identity, or how are we losing that American identity?
Where are you reading that?
It's on page 29 underneath the bison, right before where did we go wrong?
Okay.
Think in some ways we kind of have lost it, like the idea of like the Wild West and always having a place to explore and even public land. In parts of the country, you still get like Montana and Wyoming still have a lot of public land. I think Idaho still has a lot of public land. But it's, around here, if my family, we're big campers and we are big national park goers, but we tend to go in the off season because we don't like the crowds.
Mhm.
But we camp a lot and um, it's hard to do that around here for free. Where I grew up, you could pretty much camp anywhere because there was lots of public land. And I grew up in Oklahoma, but um, it's not set up that way around here, and that was something that was really hard when we started having kids and started to do like family camping. I was like, we had to pay. That was a new concept to me. So things like that, where like some of that wild in ideology, we've lost it either. And I understand that sometimes you need to charge for to keep up the parks or the grounds or whatever. Like there's good reason for asking people to contribute a little bit. And when we talk about paying, I mean, we're talking like what, 35, $45 a night, I think is the most I've ever paid camping. Um, Maybe at Yellowstone when we camped there, we might have paid a little more at Yellowstone, but it's not an unreasonable amount in it. There is some maintenance that is required. So I understand that, but I do think to some extent we've lost the idea of um, the backwoodsman and the just the wildness of the land that I think is really much a part of the American identity. Nobody else has a historical stories like we have of the Wild West. That is a very American idea, and for better or worse, I don't know, but I do think it's a little bit gone.
Yeah. Thanks,
The
Whitney.
American identity back then was conquer everything. Leave
Yeah.
the free home of the brave. They conquered everything going westward, whether it was
And
plants or animals or other humans.
and pushed the Native Americans off who
Yeah,
lived in union with nature,
in harmony. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
harmony. Yeah.
Yeah, and
So
that's a good point, Pam, because on page 30 it talks about, that ruthless approach to other species made sense, right? Um, in the center there it says in the old days it was nature that ate us, froze us, starved us, flooded us, killed our livestock, and threatened our crops. The more we beat back nature, um, tamed it, ate it, or otherwise eliminated it, the better off we were, right? So that goes along with that same kind of concept. But as you read through there, a them versus us philosophy, right? It was, those that pushed really hard against nature, it says, survived to pass on their genes, and then it was nature or humans, but never both. There was no sharing of spaces or resources with non-domesticated species, no coexistence at all, and it seemed to work well for humans until now, right? Until now, when we're reading this book and you're like, oh, wait, all this history that we have learned and that we've gone through, it's like, oh, now it's biting us, right? Um, but I don't know,
And I
that kind of made me personally, that made me feel a little bit of like shame, right? It's like you're thinking about all these things that we just feel like are normal. But did anyone else have that, like, or what did you feel, I guess, when you read through that kind of from pages, where did we go wrong portion of that chapter?
I think it made me feel like man is the ultimate invasive species, destroying everything else for its own good.
Well, and I think that's very much a part of European culture, which
Yes.
most of us are derived from. And that when you can read about Native Americans and how they lived, they had a great reverence for animals and plants and the earth. They didn't feel like they owned it. It was their mother. They took care of it. And I'm not trying to idolize those people because they had, you know, they fought wars with other tribes as well, but they had a completely different um, outlook than what Western culture has and has brought to whatever lands it invaded.
And is the end result better or worse?
I don't know. Better in some ways, worse in others. And you can't, we're not going to be able to go back. You can't rewind things that much. Um, that was a hard life, and people were trying to live an easier life, a better life. It just, some things worked and some things didn't work as well.
And I think they are even historically we do what the species does, right? We are a species that exists in the creative order of the world, and I think that we have more cognitive ability, but we also there's some deeply rooted physiological drives that lead us to explore, lead us to grow, lead us to conquer. And I'm not saying that these things are what we should be doing. Or correct, but they are a huge innate part of our human nature. So I think part of it is, any microcosm where you look at take a group of species, or you're looking at them and you watch them, and they do what they are designed to do, and it's all in their own best interest, right? And so I think because we have the opportunity to examine the angles of it and declare it moral or immoral, or good or bad, um, just gives us a different vantage point, but we're still doing what the species does.
I'm not finding where he talked about this, but I was thinking this, and then also he says this in the book about how we tend to think in the present, you know. So if you think of people settling in a land or pioneering a land, they're not thinking long term in the sense of if we hunt all of this, they'll be gone forever, or they're just trying to survive and not thinking long-term consequences of those choices sometimes. And I think that we can still do that today, even, you know, especially if your first response is one of fear, like someone recently was telling me, like, oh, they just hate spiders and the spiders outside their house scare them so bad. So they're trying to kill all the spiders. But then they're frustrated because they have bugs. And then the person, you know, the bug person's like, well, if you left the spiders, you know, you might have less bugs. Like they kind of work together. And so, but we're not always thinking that way. And Whitney, I think if this is what you're saying, like it's easier to look back and say, oh, maybe they were wrong or that was silly. But when you're thinking about in the moment survival for some of these people, you can kind of see maybe why they chose how they did at times.
An unlimited supply too. They might not have thought, oh, I'm going to take this and it will be extinct. You know, there's going to be more and more and more.
Yeah, it's interesting though when you read how, and I've seen this in documentaries too, like even back then it was like, oh no, the trees are all gone. Like we're getting rid of all the trees. We should probably stop, you know? So yeah, just interesting, important to be aware.
Or at least
Hmm.
plant trees when you take them out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone hasn't watched the Lorax? When I taught natural resources to my eighth graders when I was teaching, we used to watch the Lorax because we would always have a forestry unit and a natural resources unit. And that's the same thing. I know it's so childish, but actually it's the same thing that one slur cut down all the trees and then there was no more needs. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should go watch it because it's actually really good. It's a Dr. Seuss movie. And my daughter loves it, but um, yeah, it's just taking care of those resources and a lot of comes. Yeah. Good. Thanks for sharing. Okay, a couple, we have about 8 minutes left, but something else, we kind of already talked about national park system, but I want to move to the Endangered Species Act. So, um, Rachel Carson was kind of the mastermind, right, with the book, The Silent Spring, that kind of sparked that Endangered Species Act. But something that is quite interesting, and I deal with this a lot with my farmers, and pesticides, the Endangered Species Act. But what has it talks about what it actually has done for the conservation movement. So what was that? What has the Endangered Species Act really done for the conservation movement?
It said a large part of what it's done is turned property owners against the conservation movement.
Yep, exactly. Hit the nail on the head, Ashley. That's what it says on kind of towards the bottom, that second paragraph on page 33. The Endangered Species Act has a much maligned piece of legislation that has been far more successful at turning property owners against the conservation movement than it has been in saving troubled species. Um, and from a ag and natural resource educator point of view, a farmer point of view, a pesticide user point of view, we're backtracking. We're trying to fix the problem that has now become a problem because we haven't taken this seriously. So that's just something to think about, is that it's recognizable that we haven't taken this necessarily as seriously as we should have. Um, so going with
I,
that, what has been the biggest flaw of the Endangered Species Act?
I don't know if this is the answer to your question, but when he wrote on the bottom of 33
Hmm.
that about the golden cheeked warblers living in the juniper brush, and so to get around uh, the government, people who own lands with juniper brush would just take it out.
Down the
And
trees.
so the birds would go too.
Yep.
They didn't want the government telling them what to do with their trees.
No, nobody likes to be told what to do with their property.
Yep. Private property.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah. So, and it's, I guess the answer, the biggest flaw, on page 35. The biggest flaw of the Endangered Species Act is it focuses on saving single species rather than saving the ecosystems on which those species depend. Which is interesting to think about. Because and I think, I mean, personally, like, yeah, if I'm gonna look at endangered species, I'm probably not gonna look at their whole entire ecosystem and saving it. I'm just gonna look at that specific species, right? Like the gold cheek warbler. Like, let's save them. But you also have to have their ecosystem to be able to help them help them survive. So I think just looking at the bigger picture is what he's talking about. But that would definitely be the biggest flaw. Um, Anyone else have anything to add on the Endangered Species Act?
I thought it was
Oh,
interesting noting that they don't take action until it's at like a dire
Mhm.
low rate, um, or decline, instead of when it's starting to decline, maybe we look into it. They wait until it's declined to a perilously low number, it says.
Yeah, crazy.
well, I did too. I like that he said, you you need to use a carrot more than a stick. Um, Provide rewards for people who go and buy a piece of property and completely restore it and restore the habitat and the biodiversity of the land, and there should be rewards for that.
Mhm.
Like
Nobody
some
likes to be
counties,
told what
oh,
to
go ahead.
do, but for the people who do it, there's an enticement there, an encouragement.
Some counties reward you if you get rid of your Bradford pear trees.
Well, do they?
Yes. Yep.
That's good.
Our Soil and Water used to have a program. Johnson County did, but I don't know if they still do. I think they do.
About Bradford pears or
Yeah.
hmm.
Pam, do you know you do a lot of work over at Soil and Water?
I'm not sure how much they do currently. They
Okay.
do the landowner.
Yeah, sure. The surveys. Yeah. Okay, last little thing before we hop off and um on page 36, this is kind of where I'll leave you, but the two primary missteps that we've taken in conservation, biological conservation. The first one, and most serious, it says on that second paragraph, has been to